Good evening and welcome to another episode of Capsules of Love. I am your host, Richard Lawrence Sr. Remember, God says, I love you with an everlasting love. And on this episode, part three of Capsules of Love, we want to focus still on that one topic, self care. It's such a wide topic that we're going to be here for a couple of weeks just talking about self care as it pertains to the person or the individual. So, in this part three, we'll be looking at emotions. Now, I must admit, like I said, that self care and self love goes hand in hand. Your emotions and stress also goes hand in hand. If your emotion is healthy, you're going to be stress free. If your emotion is in chaos, you're going to have a lot of stress. So we're not going to look at the stress portion of it this week. We will look at it next week. But today we're going to look at your emotions. How to deal with your emotions as it pertains to self care. Number one, we must heal from past trauma. This is important to your emotions. Healing from past trauma. Whether it's trauma growing up in the home, a parent toward their child, whether it's a mother towards a child or a father towards a child, there might have been things that happened in the home. Maybe you might have been a third child like I am, and normally they say that children normally get overlooked, wherein the attention goes on the first child and the last child. So those that are in between really don't get that much attention. So it could be that you had certain childhood traumas. Mama didn't love me as much as she loved Billy because he was the first one. So we have to heal from that before we could move on. If we don't heal from these traumas that we have in our lives, we are going to find that self care is going to be a lifelong battle. Aside from childhood trauma, how about trauma from relationships? It could be a marriage relationship, it could be a boyfriend girlfriend relationship, whatever the relationship is. It could be relationship employee boss. We go through trauma in every form of relationship. And until we are healed from those relationships, we cannot successfully move forward in life. If I don't deal with the loss of that last job that I had because I got terminated, then that's going to lead me to have some trauma going into my next job. If I don't heal from the trauma of my first divorce, then it makes no sense I get married again because I'm going to head for divorce in my second marriage. If I have childhood traumas that have not been dealt with when I have children, I'm going to pass on those childhood traumas also on my children. So we understand that healing from trauma, emotional trauma, is very, very important to self-care. Emotional trauma affects every aspect of every relationship we could ever deal with. It also affects how you interact with others socially. It also affects how your relationships operate. You have lack of trust because of what happened in your first relationship. So we understand that healing, self-care, healing from these trauma or getting help with these trauma is extremely, extremely important to moving forward. Keep in mind also that self-care is not a one-time event. No, self-care is continuous throughout life. Why would I say such a thing? The person who you were at 10 years old is not who you are at 20 because you had all those 10 years of going through puberty and the teenage years. So you find that you have mature and you have evolved from 10 years old to now that you're 20. Who you are at 20 is not who you are going to be when you're at 30, and so on and so forth. So for someone who is at 60 years old, you find that each decade this person matures, or they gain experience, or they're not the same. And so, because my body ages and because I also evolve, then also does my caring for myself. So does taking care of those traumas, because if I don't take care of them, folks, they're just going to be a big mound. And then we go through life and wonder, oops, what happened? I never totally get healed. So self care is not a one time thing, it's continuous. We have to see to it. And finally, just for this episode, look at women who suffer trauma during childbirth. They also carry this thing for their husband. I lay my life down for you and for these children. I almost died while I was pregnant with this child. Look at the labor I went through. And that is trauma that never get dealt with. Let me leave a bit of scripture with you. In Ephesians chapter 6, it says, husbands, love your wives like Christ loved the church and gave himself for it. God never asked the woman to love the man. The instruction was for the man to love the woman, because when the man loved the woman and demonstrate his love for her in attending to her needs and her cares, the woman by default would acquiesce and submit herself willingly to the man in love, in everything, because this man cares for her. But when that is not there, man, we find that women become traumatized over and over again. This doesn't mean that men also don't suffer from trauma in relationships as well. No, the self-care that I'm speaking about here goes across the board for male and for female. But now we're out of time. Remember, as we begin is how we end. Remember, God says that I love you with an everlasting love. Next week, we're going to continue speaking about self-care part 4. We will look at the role stress plays with the trauma and our emotions when we come next week. Until we meet again, may you have a wonderful rest of your evening, and may God bless you. Remember, God says, I love you with an everlasting love.